welcome everyone to the ELOC online session. And today we have a wonderful celebration with Pierre Dillenbourg from Lausanne, who is giving us exciting presentation about somewhat crazy ideas, I understood. It will be interesting to see, like, what do you think about it, or what do we think about it? So I'm first going to tell you a little bit about the structure, like what's the schedule today. We have this opening and introduction of our dear speaker, and then he will give us about 45-minute presentation, and then Erno Lehtinen and him are going to discuss about the topic, and after this I will ask you to decide whether you want to participate in small group discussions or not. If not, please leave us then so that I can share everyone to the breakout rooms nicely. Otherwise we may end up having half empty rooms, and then it's not that nice. After the breakout room discussion, we will then actually have the wrap up and closing. So that will be it. I'm really looking forward to this one. Like, this is our 5th presentation in this fall, and it seems like we will be able to continue for quite a long time. Now we have set up 2 other presentations, but we will continue in the spring as well. So Pierre will talk to us about the classroom as the digital system. And I honestly didn't know much about his work or his sciencey things or his personality before, but I've been finding out some details from your colleagues, Pierre, and from internet. And first I had an idea that we have had this kind of tradition that I introduce everyone in numbers and in words, and I thought, like, well, maybe not numbers anymore, like it's done already. But then I looked at your numbers and they were so crazily amazing that I had to do it. So the numbers come from Scopus, and he has just crazy number of citations and articles and co-authors, nearly 400 co-authors. I barely know that many persons, I think, but you have been co-authoring with such a big number of people, so it's pretty amazing. And your citation index, I was thinking it can't be like it's if you divide your age, which is probably something like 40, and it's just slightly below that, I think. So it's really crazy how much work you have been able to do in science, because when I looked at what you have been doing in the business area, like you have been starting up as many businesses, you have been active in boards of many companies, and you have been developing, you are really one of the first in the world to start developing massive open online courses, I understood. So it's really a crazily good opportunity for us to hear your talking here. And also it is a wonderful opportunity to maybe learn to know something about you as a person. I thought, like, you might like this picture because I heard from Sanna that you love sauna, and now we know that you might like to try a winter swimming and sauna someday when you will come to Finland. That's very, very popular nowadays. So you are an excellent skier. You love winter, I heard, and snow, cross-country skiing especially, and unconventional scientific settings. So now I free you, and you can jump into your presentation, and then we will go back to the breakout question. That is the best breakout question I've heard in the ELOC so far. So Dearly welcome, Pierre, and thank you so much for accepting our invitation. And we are really honored to have you here.
So my honor to be here to celebrate the long career of Erno. I would not say the grandfather of education, because we have about the same age. I'm a few years younger, just turned 60 last weekend. But I know how much Erno has been influential to the education community all over Finland. I've been to many places in Finland. I've been, of course, several times to Helsinki, but also Joensuu, Jyväskylä with Päivi, Oulu with Sana, Rovaniemi, Tampere. Anyway, so it's a pleasure to be there. My talk is about something which is not very serious, which is to consider classroom as a digital system, the entire classroom with the kids and the teacher as one computational thing. And then after that, if it's still for you, I will propose 3 even less serious things, which are my gadgets. So let me start with this idea of the classroom as a digital system, which I summarize by the word classware. The groupware, class software, classware, you would say, one of these new words that's absolutely uninteresting to bring new words. Let me explain what I mean by that. It started like that. I went to, one of my colleagues was having very bad teaching evaluation from his students, and he said, could you attend my lecture? And I went to see his lecture, and there was, at some point in time, nobody was paying attention to him except the guys in the first row. Like Jake, you promised to do that during my talk, and the first row students, they do that, and the teacher was only seeing them, and the rest of the class was completely lost. And I thought, wow, it happens to all of us that we lose attention of the students for a while. But then we do something. We tell a joke, or we make deliberately a mistake, or we tell them, Mesdames, Messieurs, this might be a question for the exam. And we get back the attention of the classroom. But this guy was not even noticing that he lost the attention of the students. So from that, we started to develop a technology which would be able to give, I wanted him to have an indicator. Maybe his phone vibrates when he has less than 20% attention from his class. So what we did, we put 2 cameras in front of the class, and we tried to predict the attention of the students. We had also, as you see in the picture, eye tracker on the teacher. But let me focus on these 2 cameras. Do you believe that if you film a student, you can measure attention? Well, for car driver, we can, but for students, we cannot. They are so good. They are 25 years old when they are with us, maybe 23. For 18 years, they learn to fake attention. They learn to look at the professor like that and say, yeah. But Saturday, I will go with Nina, I will go skiing and so on. No, the students are too good. And in both sense, I had one guy, he would arrive because I teach at 8 o'clock. At 8 o'clock, he would sleep. Every class, he would fall asleep at the first minute, and he was perfect at the exam. So we're not very good at detecting attention. So how could a camera be better than a human? They are not. What the algorithm found is that what was predictive of attention. So what we do is every 15 minutes we stopped them, and there was a questionnaire: what is your level of attention? What is the level of attention of your neighbor? And then we train the machine learning algorithms to predict the score, the self-graded attention, the self-assessed attention as being the ground truth, and to predict the self-graded attention based on the last minute of video. And of course, it's not a real ground truth, it's what they declare, but that's what we had. And what the algorithm found is not the fact that they look at the teacher or not. No, it was the fact that they rotate their head at the same time. it was not an individual measure, it was the co-rotation of the head of the people, of the students, that was predictive of attention. Why? It's because if we all do this, it's because we're looking at something moving, and this something moving occurs to be the teacher. Okay, first example. You would tell me immediately, are you crazy? Are you going to put bloody cameras in our classrooms? And no. Actually, we could say, we could have cameras that don't take any picture. We don't need to capture any picture. We could compute in real time the co-rotation of the head immediately and produce only this indicator. But still, you know, I don't want to put cameras in classroom because even if we have noble intention, you don't know what will happen next. So I would not be so. But then you could also say, but Pierre, that's a technology for better teaching. Maybe fine, but actually we want less teaching. We want more active problem solving, collaborative learning, more participation, and not only better lecturing. So I will address these 2 points. And the second point is basically, Piaget versus TED. In TED Talks, the speaker is fantastic, he's speaking, things are moving great, and Piaget is, there is no lecture, that's something I will discuss today. So let's take a second example of classroom technology. This is Physics 101, one of the most difficult class of EPFL. We take 2% of the best students, and half of them will still fail Physics 101. I say 2% or 4%. And this is typically exercise session. So they get exercise and they start to do the exercise, the recitation section. And when they need help, they call the TA. You see the TA is on the right, and there are 2 guys there, one on the front row is waiting for the TA while working, and the other one is doing nothing. And see what will happen. So he's doing absolutely nothing for the most difficult class, Physics 101. And suddenly when the TA will be ready, where will she go? She will go to the guy who was doing nothing, the team that was doing nothing, because they immediately capture her attention, and the other guy is still working like that, did not notice. So we found that the 62% of the waiting time, they were doing nothing. So we developed this little lantern on your left that you saw on my first slide, which is a simple device. They put it on the table. The color is the exercise. So exercise 1, and they turn 2, 3, 4. So if somebody is exercise 4, needs help, but everybody is exercise 1, maybe can wait a little bit. The number of LEDs goes up with time. So if you ask help after 1 minute, no, you should try by yourself. But if the LED goes up to the top, it means you've been trying quite a while. And once you need help, you push on it, it starts blinking slowly and then faster and faster. And then the TA can see who has been waiting for the longest. We saw things like TA spending 30 minutes with 2 students because they were the 2 only girls in the room, and the rest of the males waiting for 20 minutes and receiving no help. So we wanted to help TA to distribute the attention in a productive way. And you see with this very simple, not smart technology, the wasted time was reduced from 62 to 6%. Now we have 2 examples of classroom as a digital system. The first one, the bottom one, the classroom is the input. It's not the keyboard. In most learning analytics, the input of the learning analytics systems is what they do on the machine. Here, it's the classroom. And on the upper part, the input is the classroom because they all turn their device, but the output is also the classroom because these little lights are distributed spatially where attention should be focused. So that's the notion of a digital system, and what it means. But well, if a classroom is a digital system, it means that we have sensors and we have actuators. That's the basic of displays. That's the basic idea of a digital system. So the sensors, you would say, okay, we have cameras and mic, but we have many more. Huh? That's what you find in most mobile phone. But you can also buy a lot of other things. You can equip a class with a lot of sensors, even though the most usual one are cameras and microphones. And then you have display. So the output in learning analytics quite often is a dashboard that represents the activity of the class. Here is one, it's not from my lab, I just got it randomly on the web. Here is another one. So any classroom technology that you see today, there is a dashboard that summarizes the behavior, the performance, the work of all students in a class to help the teacher to orchestrate this class. So basically, you have sensors and actuators, and that's the classroom system. The sensors can be a keyboard, of course, in this case, the keyboard activity, but it can be in the previous example, something else. And then the data visualization, quite often they are a bit boring things, but we should be a bit more creative. That's my favorite video. It shows on the top left, you see the year. It shows the evolution of Europe year by year, and the borders changing all the time. The video is jumping a little bit. And the best way to fight against show a nationalist person this video for a few seconds and to say, come on, stop saying that your country cannot be changed in any way. Europe has been a mess for 2,000 years, changing borders all the time, and so on and so on. I like this one as well, how to visualize the flow of flights over the world. It's just an example of, we are still very far from having very interesting visualization in the classroom. We have a lack of creativity in our field. But that's the idea. On the input is the data from the classroom, and the output has some dashboard that you can share with the student. Okay, nothing very fancy so far. And the role of this dashboard, the function of the system, is to help the teacher monitoring what's going on and intervening with the students who need intervention. So for that, the technology has operators. If there is nothing between the input and the output, you don't have a computational system, you have a mirror, basically. And so in some way, there is a processing that is going on between the input and the output. And this means the application of various operators, aggregation, comparison, visualization, and so on. So you aggregate the data, you make comparison, you rank them, and then you produce an image. So these are transformation of the input to generate the output. It's not just a mirror, it's a bit more sophisticated. These outputs can be distributed or centralized. For the example of the lantern, you see the information is not in one place, but all over the place. We try to have exactly the same input, but to visualize in a centralized way, like there was exactly the same information on these bars. And that worked well, except it became a bit competitive, because there are too many boys in this engineering school. They saw it as a board game, and they started to compete a little bit. The output can be in real time, as in the above the case. You can click on one learner and see what he's doing now. Or in the bottom, it was a replay of the attention of the students in the class that you saw before over time. So you can have real-time visualization. Maybe a teacher may be interested to replay the data after that. This display can be focal, it's on the computer of the teacher, or it can be in the background. It can be something on the walls that is just changing. Sometimes you don't need to give very detailed information, like the level of attention might be a plant. And if the plant is like this, then it means the attention is going down. And if the plant is like that, then the attention is high. So you can use peripheral vision to convey information. Here is an example to regulate teams. In teams, when somebody dominates or somebody does not participate, it does not work well. So the system here had the microphone array in the middle, so he could know the angle of the voice of the person speaking. He knew who was speaking, and we could show to the team a dashboard, an image of their own collaboration. Of course, you don't look at the table all the time when you are collaborating. You put document, coffee, milk, and so on. But at some point, so it was a bit more in the background. Here is an example. So the blue guy was a French guy, and they speak too much. But of course, here it was a real-time visualization to show the effect. But knowing who was speaking in the last 10 seconds is not so interesting. What was interesting is knowing who was speaking in the last 20 minutes, because some of them would totally deny that they've spoken more than everybody else. But there it was trivial. And again, so it was not the idea that people spend the time looking at the table. It's sometimes we can use peripheral vision. You don't look at it, look at the table. So it can be public, like the one above. It's used by the teacher, as you can see, to discuss the things with the learners. I will explain it in a minute. Or it can be private, for instance. The teacher doesn't want all students who see who is not doing well, so he prefers to have this information on his tablet, and he works across the class on his tablet. It depends on the class period. Sometimes it's not a problem to show that one student is late. In some class, it might be a problem. So let me explain this dashboard, because it was quite a success. When the students designed this dashboard, I say to this student, no, it's 10 times too complex. And actually, he got very good results with it. So interesting story. It was for vocational education, training, logistic assistants who move boxes in a warehouse and have a lot of difficulties learning logistics, the optimization of storage. So we designed these augmented reality things where they build a warehouse in the middle of the table. Augmented reality means we beam digital information on the top of this physical object. So the color is the content of the shelves. And with this, they could build their own warehouse. So that's my warehouse. This is where the trucks arrive, where the trucks leave. And here, you see, now the shelves were too close for the forklift to turn. So on the left is the part for the human eyes. You can read the instruction. And the students had to solve problems. The problem is described on the left. This one, it was about maximizing storage. Once they are ready, they could run the simulation. And you see the life in the warehouse. And these are for different activities where you don't make a box, but only you take one little object. How to load the truck in the reverse order of deliveries while managing the center of gravity of the truck. And then the levels low. And finally, the most difficult for them, stock management. So, very cool technology. We did a usability experiment. We compare with the same thing, but multi-touch, and the results were better. It was like that in the classroom. They would play it, and the teacher would ask them to compare on the whiteboard their solution. They would copy it on paper and bring it to the whiteboard. But when we try to compare with paper, both in terms of understanding on the left and problem-solving skills on the right, there was no significant difference. In my lab, we always invent cool gadgets, but we cry a lot. No significant difference. And Son Dolan, who did that, he analyzed all the video and he noticed, he compared, for instance, the best group and the worst group. And the difference between the two of them was the green bar. The green bar was when they discuss, they reflect about why a warehouse was good or not. So they were, in some way, he called that manipulation temptation, which looked like a Catholic thing. The thing was so cool that they would move the shelf, play, run, move the shelf, play, run, move the shelf, play, run, and so on. And if there is not a phase of reflection, understanding, predicting, you don't learn, you just play. So we gave the teacher a card, and the students could not run the simulation without calling the teacher. And the teacher would ask them, okay, what do you think will happen? They would say, okay, think about it, and call me back when you have an idea. And with this dashboard, then you obtain significant results. So here is the example of the dashboard. You see there were 4 teams. I don't know if you see clearly. On the first 4 rows on the left, there are snapshots of the warehouse they've designed for the 4 teams. On the bottom, you can compare 2 different warehouse in terms of performance. But you see on the top right, you see this yellow to red bar, which describe the activity. Red means they manipulate too much. They do too much of manipulation without much thinking. That was really cool for the teacher to regulate, to force them to think and to reflect. And with this, thanks to this dashboard, we managed to have significant results, both in terms of understanding and in terms of problem solving, so transfer. So the dashboard, the output of the classroom system can have this effect. What the goal of a dashboard? The goal of a dashboard is to help teachers to manage the class. But why should he manage the class? It's that for students to learn more. So it's not often that we prove that actually the dashboard led to higher learning outcomes. This is also the case for Lumilo. Lumilo is a technology developed by Ken Nolstein at CMU. It's
assessments that drive intelligent learning software. When a teacher glances around the room, Lumilo allows them to instantly see when students are currently struggling.
So I was here saying that this is one of the rare results where you show the effectiveness of a dashboard. This is on the horizontal is the score of the pretest. So on the left is the weaker students, on the right is the better students. On vertically is the attention of the teacher. And the 3 lines are with no glass. For the blue line, the teacher having no glass, the green teacher having some kind of glass but without much information, so kind of a placebo group, and the red one was with this glass with the analytics, so showing the activity of the learners, who was idle, who was doing something else, who was struggling, and so on. And you see the red curve means the teacher, a descent means the teacher spend more attention to the students with weaker grades and with better grades. So this dashboard and the previous one are 2 examples of, it's not only that the dashboard is useful, is that we measure this usefulness on the learning gain of the students. Now, next step. So far, we've captured the input of the system was the behavior of the learners, but what about capturing the behavior of the teacher? This is an example of a teacher in France teaching science, I think chemistry. So in a chemistry labs, and you see there are rows of students, workbench, 3 students, and the teacher could see where he spent more time. He was not going very deep into the lab. He was kind of staying in front of them. So it's a tool for teacher to regulate his behavior. Same here. That was at the Lays American School here, and the teacher spent a lot of time on his desk, bottom right, a lot of time on the left part of the class, but not much time on the right part of the class for some reason. So you show that to the teacher, you don't need to explain anything. Say, hey, Look at this. Do you want to reflect on your lesson? Very simple. Here, it was a bit more crazy. We gave the teacher a lot of things. An eye tracker, that you can see, and this is Luis Prieto, the guy we did the study just before, but also accelerometers, all kind of gadget to measure his activity. And what did we display? What did we extract from that? We use all kinds of machine learning things, but basically what I wanted to show is this. We wanted to analyze his activity. Time is from left to right. The graph in the middle is what actually happened in the classroom when the teacher was interacting with the whole class only with us or with subgroups, and the different activities of the teacher or the groups, explanation, questioning, monitoring. And you see at the bottom what the machine learning algorithm has extracted from the eye tracker, the audio recording and so on. And it's not accurate, but it's still pretty amazing how much you can analyze, not in real time, analyze the behavior of the classroom to extract information. Back to this one, but also the previous one, the teacher was working with a big headset. This one, we put an eye tracker on the teacher. That's a bit crazy. I was not going to put things on teacher. That's a bit too heavy. But this is research. I've been teaching with an eye tracker. It's not easy. You are a bit, you feel a bit strange. So you would say, okay, no, not only you put cameras, but you want to put things on the head of teachers. You are really crazy. And that's, well, it's a question of design. On the right-hand side, for instance, there is the classroom of that I've seen at Kortrijk in Belgium, developed by, she may be listening to us, and I suddenly forgot the name. Are you there? If you are there, if you recognize your classroom, your name, I just emailed her 1 hour ago. Anyway, which is okay because it was online course for adults and so on and so on, but otherwise there is a lot of technology, while on the left you see it's very in the background. So we have to design technology in such a way that it's not overwhelming. Now I'm back to the second question. And for that I take another example. We work with carpenters. And carpenters, they have to understand statics, the propagation of force in beams. The teachers told us, can you help us, because we need to teach statics in 3 hours. A civil engineer do it for 3 years, but now we have to do it in 3 hours without mathematics. So we designed this kind of tool. You see, it's again augmented reality. There is the real image of the beams, of the mock-up of the beams, and then we overlay the forces. Here is how it looks like. So the students take a picture of the construction area. He highlights the beam structure. Then he can edit it on his platform, and he will eventually actually make it. Since he's a carpenter, he can do this kind of small mock-ups and then use it for augmented reality, so for overlaying digital information on a real image and reasoning on static. So this is my roof, and I have to reason, what if there is a load on my roof? Like solar panels should be rather on the south, but then they deform the roof, but the snow melts faster on the south, and it's more heavy on the north. So can I reason on the deformation of my roof by placing charges, water tanks, solar panels, snow, jacuzzi, whatever you need to put on your roof? And you see here on the left, 23% extension versus 17% on the right. Then you might say, yeah, but I really want a jacuzzi in my bedroom. Can I get it if I take a more expensive wood, or if I take broader, larger beams or something? Okay, what's my point here? Why I'm talking about this? Because you can let a student, this is fantastic. I mean, my students are very creative. They develop this fantastic thing. But let's be honest. You give this, here you can see the augmentation, you can exaggerate the deformation of the beam. Like if my beam was in marshmallow, it would look like that. Okay, fantastic. But give this to student carpenters. Let them play for 20,000 years. They will not discover Newton's law. We have to be modest about constructivism. I like to talk about semi-constructivism, like Ralph Piaget. You know, yes, they will try, they will feel, they will explore something, but they will not discover in 40 minutes what humanity took 20,000 years to discover. And so when you talk about TED versus Piaget, yeah, the Piaget can come with the problem-solving phase, but then, as Dan Schwartz put it, there is a time for telling. No, they've been trying. They smell a little bit the solution, but they did not say "haha, eureka." Then a lecture is very effective, and that's my example. One of my favorite examples from Professor Manu Kapoor at ETH Zurich, who wanted to teach standard deviation, but instead of coming and say, "Guys, the definition of standard deviation is blah blah blah. Let's do exercise." No. He said, hey, mesdames et messieurs, look at these three soccer players, Mike, Dave, Ivan. Which one has been the most regular over years? Try to find some way to represent regularity. Draw several solutions, try different things. So students try min, max, all kind of simple mathematics. They are teenagers. This one started to plot a graph. Actually, one of them said, hey, but if we put a rope on this graph and we pull the rope, then the longest rope is the least regular, which is actually a first intuition of standard deviation. And then at some point, he said, okay, no, I give my lecture. And here is the result. In red is those, he called that productive failure. He let them mess around for a while, and then blue, direct instruction. So the PF, they had exploration and then teaching, and the blue was teaching and then exercise, traditional way. And you see that in terms of procedural knowledge, there is no significant difference. Both of them are same level in terms of computing a standard deviation, but in terms of conceptual understanding and transfer, they are much better by having this phase where they ask themselves questions. So that's the point. There is a time for telling. And in principle, this telling should not fall randomly, like, and now you stop, I have my PowerPoint and I go through. No, the briefing should build upon what the students have done during the exploration phase. So it's called debriefing because it's not just a lecture, it's discussing what they have done and then connecting to what the theory. And that's a difficult thing. Here, it was debriefing. I mentioned that already. That's, the tool helped the teacher to do the debriefing. So the classware, the goal of the technology, collecting data and showing data, was to increase the art of debriefing. Another example, in my class, I have a class which looks like that. I teach HCI, namely, and different style of interface. So I say, hey guys, here is a small game. You have to order 20 train tickets. And using 4 interface, command line, form, drag and drop, and a graphical interface. Please do so. So they will feel in their chair, in their body, the difficulty of different interfaces that do exactly the same task. And I want them to compare that. So once they've done it, I ask them to rate which one they prefer, to rank them. And then, so I started with a small introduction, individual activity. They play with this train ticket activity, they rank them, and then the system automatically takes 2 people with opposite opinion. They did not rank the choice in the same way and ask them to argue. So I have 150 students in the classroom. So the system generates 75 chats. And in every chat, there are 2 students who did not make the same choice individual phase. And so we have this, what we call social cognitive conflict, because they disagree, there is more argumentation. You see their choice on the right, they have to agree now, and on the left, they chat. Here is another example I use in my class, the same thing. We find people with opposite opinion on an opinion map, and this is the discussion I had in the 10 minutes That was all the chat being compiled. And then once they've done that, I show you them the data, because the system has recorded actually the time it takes to order a train ticket in every interface. And now they can discuss again, but by seeing the data, I want them to understand that HI is about analyzing data. And then I do the debriefing, and the system aggregates for me all the opinions, all the data, and so on and so on. So, and finally, I give my lecture. So that's what I call an orchestration graph. We had class activities, introduction, lecture, debriefing at the end. We had team activities, 2 phases of argumentation, and individual activities. And between them, you have operators that take the data from one activity and feeds the next activity. So if we take my classroom system, I said we have the input in the classroom, operators, and the dashboard, and this system fulfills the function of monitoring, but it does more. It also fulfills the function of debriefing, which is very important in a constructivist approach. And finally, a last function, which is time management. In this task, this was the completion of my students, or it was another task, but blue are those who finished, no, those who are working, and red are those who finished. And you see, after, you tell your students, okay, please do that, you have 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, you have 90% of the students who finished. What do you do as a teacher? You wait a little bit. Yeah, but you wait, but then 90% are doing nothing. So they start to read the email and so on. So when do you decide, when the slope is getting flat, it means that if you wait more, you will not have more finishers, then it's time to stop the lesson. So here the dashboard was not for monitoring, was not for debriefing, it was for time management. So that's what I call classware. It's a system. It's easy to say a classroom is a system. Everything is a system. My phone is a system, my left shoe, my fingers are a system. A system is a set of things interconnected that fulfill a higher function. What is the higher function of classroom as a system? Is orchestration, monitoring, intervening, debriefing, timing, activities, managing the class. That's what I wanted to say. Now I have more gadgets, but Mina, you tell me if you want me to go. That was the not so serious part, but the next part is even less serious. So Mina, you tell me if Finnish people can cope with the lack of being serious from the Belgian people.
We love it. Go.
Should I go?
For it. Yes,
3 small
please.
examples, just to have fun. 3 examples from my lab recently. In the 2 examples I show, we call that augmented reality. The one with logistics and the one with carpenter. But it's not reality. In reality, you cannot move shelves with 2 fingers. In reality, you don't see forces. So it's actually not showing reality. It's kind of having something realistic, but then escaping from the reality. One thing we did for florists is something that you cannot do in the real world is to change the color of flowers. It's escaping from the reality. You can, I don't know if you can see it, but you could, so you make a bouquet, you take your phone, you make a tour of the bouquet, you have a 3D model of the bouquet, and then you say, oh, what if I had to change the color of the bouquet? First of all, you spare money because you don't have to buy a new bouquet every day to your wife. You can change the color every day. But here, the interest was to let them explore the design space of bouquet. It was mostly, and it was again, in reality, you cannot paint flowers. You cannot change the color of flowers. And there is something interesting, which is the notion of escaping from reality. The last example, imagine you are a gardener. There is a garden before. You have to close your eyes and see how the garden will look like later on. A good gardener can do it. A novice cannot do it, and he cannot come back 2 years later and say, sir, excuse me, I'm going to move your tree there because the tree makes too much shadow on your kitchen. So here is this example of escaping from reality. Let me make sure he's not very happy about this. Is it shaky for you? Yeah. So this is Joseph the gardener. He throws a drone in his garden, like any gardener. The drone will make a 3D model of the garden, and then Joseph will put his headset and try to do what a gardener would do by closing his eyes, which is to imagine how the garden will look like. So this is my garden, and then I will do what a gardener does, which is to plant trees. So here it is. I go in the design mode, and I can put some katsura. Once he has done it, he can do what an experienced gardener would do by closing his eyes, which is to be in the future garden. Now there is in the garden. If the video was better, you would see the trees moving slightly because there is a bit of wind. So that's my garden. Okay, that's interesting. But then he can do something which is absolutely impossible, that only God is able to do, whatever God you like. Only some God is able to do it, is to change the season. You say, can you show me my garden in the summer, winter, in the fall? And then another thing that only God can do is to say, can you show me my garden now in 3 years? In 5 years? So then you can understand what an experienced gardener would say. Say, no, in 5 years there will be shadow on the kitchen and the customer will not be happy. Good. That was one thing, one of the 3 ideas. Augmented reality, what is really fun, interesting, pedagogically speaking, is to break away from reality. The second thing I wanted to show is this small robot that fits within the hands of a child. It has a mechanism so that when you move the robot, if you move the other way around, you don't break the engine. So that it gives haptic feedback. You feel the force in your hand. And the second one is that there is LEDs in the robot and the camera that films the paper, and in the paper there is a very small dot pattern that allows the robot to accurate itself by to locate accurately itself by a 1/4 millimeter several times per second. So every sheet of paper has a different activity. So we change the sheet of paper to change the activity, and we have various activities. This is one. Where you had to feel the wind to determine on the map of Europe where the high pressure point and low pressure point, wind flowing away from high pressure towards low pressure. But the funny one is this one, is swarm robotics. When you don't interact with one robot, hope it will work, but with a bunch of robots. That's a bit too shaky. So he manipulates, yeah, that will not help. It's indeed, in this case, understanding the properties of liquid, solid. You know, if you put more energy, you change a solid into a liquid and then eventually into a gas. And but it was a swarm behavior. That's something, we have in the Western world, we have a centralized mindset, and understanding swarm emergent process, why there is a traffic jam on the motorway while there was no accident, is because the first car slowed down, the second a bit more, and the 200th car has to stop, and so on. Understanding interaction, that complex phenomena emerge from the interaction between simple entities. But the video, show it. And the last thing I'm very proud for my lab, we had this project when we take kids with problems writing and we tell them to teach now this more humanoid robot, to teach him how to write. This is the Protege Effect. When you are in charge of teaching to somebody, you increase a lot of your motivation. Okay, we had success with this project, but we decided to, of course, we cannot put a robot in every classroom, and we want to work more on dysgraphia. So it's kids with severe handwriting difficulties. It's about 9% of the population. 25% of the kids have handwriting difficulties. 9% are severe. It means they will have problem in everything, because handwriting is so demanding that any other school topic is difficult. And I see these kids, they come, they're not even 7 years old, they're already broken by school. It's really sad. So there is a standard test to evaluate that, where kids write 5 sentences, and the therapist has these 13 criteria to analyze the handwriting for each of the 5 sentences, and at the sum it makes a, at the end you make a sum of the values, and above one threshold you are declared as dysgraphic. But there is only 60% agreement between two judges, and it takes 20 minutes. So we developed this technology, this version of the test on iPad. After 20 seconds, we can extract dynamic properties of handwriting, things that a therapist cannot see. So the therapy can see the static form of this graph of handwriting. So the first example on the top left is dysgraphic, right is non-dysgraphic. But then you have the speed, the pressure, and the tilt of the pen. And so we extracted features such as the second derivative of pen pressure of the pen of the tablet is highly predictive. You would say, you know, not only a therapist cannot see the pen pressure, but he can certainly not see the second derivative of the pen pressure. So by feeding a machine learning algorithm with handwriting of dysgraphic and non-dysgraphic kit, the system was able to extract very sophisticated measure that can predict dysgraphia in 20 seconds instead of 20 minutes. And okay, here is some example. The median of power spectral of speech frequency, of course, is absolutely impossible for a human to extract these features. And then we realized even more. Look at these 4 kids. The total score of dysgraphia is the same, but actually, if you look at the different feature, the speed, the pressure, the shape, and the angle of the pen, you see they have the same total score, but they have totally different problems. The first one, Mark, is not, the speed is very bad, but Patrick, the problem is rather the angle of the pen. And so it's no point to treat these 4 kids as being the same, because they don't have the same problem. So for each of them, we have very specific games that they are doing. And it's interesting, you know, we've never made advertisement for these things, and we receive email from, it was published in a few places. We receive email all the time of parents, actually quite often mother, not always mother. They say, can you help me? I don't know how to help my daughter anymore. And the point I wanted to illustrate here, people talk about AI all the time. It's never a generally intelligent tutor. It's always narrow. It's very, very specific. Here, we have a very relevant use of machine learning on a very narrow things, and that's for me the future of AI. A funny thing, you would say, but it works. We don't write on paper the same way as we write on tablet, right? But we measure transfer between paper and tablet, between Latin and Cyrillic in Kazakh language, and between English and Chinese. And what we found is the absolute values are not the same, but so for instance, this feature 14 will not be the same for Cyrillic and Latin alphabet, but a child with 2 sigma above the mean in one, with a model in one alphabet would be also with the other alphabet. So it's quite promising that we have transfer across languages. Okay, I finished by saying that a few years ago we have opened this EdTech Collider, which is a place for EdTech startups. Now, Switzerland is also a small country, 8 million people. I knew about 10 startups, but when we opened, we found 30. Now we have 81. It's quite amazing. And we have also 2 million people, more than 2 million people who have taken a MOOCs. We have 70,000 of these Timio robots sold to schools. So we have it's a funny thing because we're a School of Science and Engineering. There is no Department of Education in Lausanne, but still we have some critical mass of things in digital education. That's why we have opened a Center for Learning Science at EPFL. And with this, Mina, I really stop my talk.
Thank you. Wow. This is super inspiring and really kind of what we asked for in the ELOC. So now I would like to ask Erno, you to start posing your questions and for you two to discuss together.
So, okay, thank you, Pierre, for your very, very inspiring talk. And for me, who has been in the field of education and technology now almost 40 years, this is a great pleasure to see your presentation, because there are some things which are important here. One is that with these systems, it seems that you really have been able to make a difference, and that's has not always been the case. So that people are often exciting about the technology as such, and do not care so much what the real effects are. The second one is that even though it looks very kind of fancy application of fancy technologies, there is also all the time a kind of deep theoretical thinking underlying what you are doing, which I highly appreciate. And that's also something which is not at all always the case when people are creating new technological tools or marketing them to schools. So that it's often the way to think about technology as such without paying so much attention to the underlying theoretical understanding what we want to do.
But thank you, Erno. But if you don't say something more negative, people will fall asleep. You need to be a bit more punchy with me. Don't be so polite.
Yes, I will. No, maybe not negative, but I will ask then some questions. That was my first impression. I always have liked your work, but that was again a very, very nice summary of the very recent development. Yeah. So what I think is interesting that you have very much paid attention to tools which would help teachers to monitor what is going on in classrooms, and that's of course something which not only in teaching profession but in many other professions we know it from the expertise research, that this detailed feedback about the processes, what is going on. For example, in medicine, it has been extremely important, and if we look teaching, the serious problem for expertise development in teaching has been that teachers very seldom get detailed feedback about their activities. That's the positive part, but then the negative part as well. So I wonder what the students like about these extremely intensive monitoring systems. How they feel? Is this violating the human rights and the individuality and so on, and the privacy?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So when I said you are crazy, I thought, okay, at some point I saw, well, we can put cameras, as I mentioned, that do not capture any picture. But I don't trust the world. So if we put camera, I don't want to be the guy who bring cameras in the school and then later on people will be more nasty things with them. I think our students were okay because we said, hey, it's an experiment. Here is a consent form. We are not going to keep the data and so on and so on as any experiments. But Still, one thing was surprising to me is that twice I have given talks to schools, and teachers being a bit scared. What is this? It's crazy. But then during the coffee break, some teachers joining me say, Mr. Dillenbourg, I'm ready to try anything you have, put everything on me. I'm ready to try. So there are still some teachers who are ready, but no, what we should do is to have more indirect things. This capturing, image in the classroom. I started with this, but then later on in the talk, what I was capturing is, for instance, the activity they were doing for my class, and that was what I was showing, and not the face of student and so on. So you're right, we have to be super careful. And I don't know in Finland, but probably the same as in Switzerland, students will not accept it. Once there is a student who complained about his grade to a teacher, and the teacher replied, but I look in Moodle. You did not even download the instruction for the problem. And the student said, hey, did you look at what I do on Moodle? And then he went to make a case of that, and we had to remove this information. Well, it was a good teacher. It was probably the best teacher of PFL, who was the only one to take care to analyze online what the students have done, to follow the student and so on. But even that, the fact that the teacher would control when and if somebody has downloaded the instruction was too much. So yeah, this is why I put, this is crazy. I mean, we could do it, but we have to go into things which are much more light, much privacy protecting.
Yes, and I can imagine that it's also depending on the age, so that particularly on the higher education level, we could face more difficulties, because then students may think that that's their private thing, how they behave during the seminars or lectures or whatever, and whereas younger kids maybe accept that easier. But then a kind of more theoretical question concerning this feedback. So I think that there's something similar than in the different ways to get biofeedback of ourselves. And in many things it can have positive effects, but they also can have negative effects, that we start paying attention too much on that continuous information flow. I know people who had to stop using these sport watches because this totally destroyed their life, because they all the time were looking at that feedback of their own body, and that's caused problem. But do you think that could also happen for teachers when they get these effective ways to get feedback about the classroom situation?
I mean, we have to probably eliminate the novelty effect. It's sure at the beginning, for instance, with the interactive tables where you show how much you speak, people look at the table. But after a while, they have something to do and they stop looking at the table. So probably at the beginning, there is some kind of too much focus on this feedback device. This is why I like this peripheral. I remember when the first watch comes with measuring your heart frequency. It was in the beginning of the 80s. I was still, believe it or not, a very good runner, and I would beat several people who were just paying too much attention to control the heart frequency instead of taking some risks. So you're right. So any kind of regulation tool may have side biases, and we don't know them, I have to say, because there is a lot of dashboard research, which is focusing on the design of the dashboard and a short-term experiment.
Mm-hmm.
But we have no much clue about long-term usage of dashboard. Once I download an application for tracking ski, downhill ski, and then, the first day you see every descent, you look at your speed, your maximum speed and number of kilometers of the day. And after 1 week, you say, okay, I've done it. Huh? So, what would be two interesting questions. One is over adaptation. You behave too much in terms of the dashboard. And the other one is internalization. We've seen in some teams with a table, when we did not activate the table, one guy telling to the other guy, hey, you are red. But there was no LEDs anymore. So he was just using the table metaphor. He internalized the regulation tool by telling the other one, you are red, like if the LEDs were all turned on in front of him. So I would say a good dashboard might be internalized, especially if we consider this dashboard as being specific tool for teacher training, for the first year of teaching for a teacher, or for teachers who have difficulties. If you have difficulties, maybe you use a dashboard. It's like any prosthesis. It's an extension of your cognitive system. So, okay, you have problem teaching, use a dashboard for 3 months. And then maybe you internalize the process, the regulation given by the dashboard. Hopefully you internalize it as a self-regulation. So for instance, if every week, at the end of the week, I have this map of my classroom that shows me, as I've shown, that I always go on the left, I rarely go on the right part of my classroom for some reason. And if one day I don't receive this, if I receive that every week, every Friday, I think about it. Oh, this week I've done a bit better and so on. And then one Friday I don't receive this dashboard, this summary. I might spontaneously say, hey, by the way, was I better this week in covering the entire class instead of half per class? So I would dream about that. These are prostheses, and at some point you internalize their function and you get rid of them.
Yes, I like this idea, and I believe that this kind of methods could be very valuable in teacher education, but then as a continuous permanent use in classrooms is then another thing. And because we know that there are very strong kind of teaching conventions, and this has been kind of depending on cultural norms and also this physical environment where teaching takes place and the size of the classrooms and number of teachers, students and so on. And of course with these kind of tools, some of these conventions will be changed and then new conventions will be developed. And as you mentioned that we don't know from short experiments what kind of deeper changes will take place, but this idea that use that as a teacher training, or also with in kind of in-service teacher training, sometimes that they can reflect at least some new aspects of their teaching could be interesting method.
But my message was also a bit broader. Today your car is a computer with 4 wheels, basically. When you enter a car, you enter in a computer. And that's my vision of classrooms. Classroom, more or less, they're all the same kind of ratio, a bit like a very big shoebox. And today you have full of sensors and captors in a car, sensors and actuators in a car. And but some of them are very much in the background. But for me, entering into a classroom is entering into not a computer, but a digital system. And,
yes.
And I want to take this example because for the privacy things that you told me, Arno, my car sometimes make a beep driver attention alert.
Mm-hmm.
My car knows, my eye gaze became a bit, I don't know how it does it. It's not explained in the user guide. There must be a camera somewhere that drives my attention, or maybe it's a system that feels
Mm-hmm.
my reaction, and I don't know how it does it. But it's a loss of privacy.
Mm-hmm.
It takes information on me without asking me. But it may save my life. So in this trade-off, I am fine.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
When WhatsApp is monitoring everything I do, but does not save my life at all, then so it's always a trade-off. If you say, okay,
mm-hmm.
we do this dashboard, what we can show, as I've
mm-hmm.
shown in one case, and Ken Holstein, the CMU, showed it in this case. If you can show that this dashboard actually has a benefit on the learning gains, it changed completely the discussion with the lawyers.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes, I agree. This is a very nice example. I have, by the way, the same functions in my car, and I like it basically. But of course, the difference in terms of privacy is that this information is not hopefully it's not sent to my colleagues or anybody else. It's only feedback to myself. But then the Kara example is also
sorry, we might
yes.
need to stop at this point. Sorry,
okay.
Because we have the breakout room discussion. Is this crazy, and how this is crazy, and what's the future of this idea of digital system or classroom as a digital system? Welcome back. That was a short discussion, but hopefully us inspiring us and thought-provoking us, the presentations and Erno's and Pierre's discussion. I hand the floor to Jake now to close the session.
Okay, well, we're already a minute over, so I will, as traditional, be quite short here, but just wanted to thank Pierre and Erno and Minna for organizing this and being here. It was a really inspiring talk and exactly the kind of thing that we're looking for, really enjoying about these ELOC lectures is really getting a view on what's going on the front line of things as Erno, one of Erno's lasting legacies being that the Frontline Learning Research Journal. And yeah, hope you all can join us in 2 weeks. John Starr is going to be talking about issues in mathematics education again, but also in measurement in general, I think, and looking at how we can kind of capture students' capabilities in novel ways. So I think even if you're not necessarily interested in math education per se, it's going to be a nice talk. Note that that's going to be at 13 Finnish time, so 12 o'clock Central European time, so that he can get up early and be there at 6 a.m. Eastern US time. So hope you all can join us then for the last session before Christmas. And yeah, thanks again for joining, and thanks for the discussion.
So once more, Pierre, thank you so much for joining us in this wonderful lecture series. So I was not the organizer. This was a present for me from Minna and Jake and others. And this is a great honor for me that this is organized, and all these who accepted this invitation. I'm really impressed.
I myself honor as well. So hope we have still a chance to come and have some face-to-face meetings sometime in Finland.